Check one, check two. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of YA Coding Camp, Good Friday edition. And we're going to be starting off a new project that is pretty exciting because we've all heard of it. Most of us have heard of it. We're essentially going to be making an Instagram clone. Now, I'm just going to share my screen to give you an idea. So this is what we're setting off to make today in terms of the UI, the user interface. I found this Photoshop file online. It was a free download. It actually has a few different screens in it, but we're going to be focusing on the home screen, the main one, as you see when you open the app. Definitely poses some unique and fun challenges for us here. First and foremost, we're going to be designing it for mobile, at least at first, to make it look good on a phone. We've done a little bit in this course with mobile, but mostly just with columns, making things multi-column to single. But we usually started with a bigger size and kind of worked our way down. We're going to be starting small, and then if everything goes well, create the, how it would look on a computer. Now you may think, oh, Instagram is just on your phone, and that's kind of correct, but Instagram does have a web version of their site. So there are times where we can lay things out differently than just this single column. Some other challenges here are we got some cool circular gradients, which we'll look at a few different ways to solve things like that, showing up again there. We have this nice empty space. That's where images are going to go, and we're going to deal with when it's a wide image, a square image, a tall image, and just see how we can handle those different instances. There's some nice icons. We will likely not rip these icons directly, but instead use Font Awesome, which is a library we've used in the past, to have nice vector icons at scale, and doesn't require us to rip out graphics right from the Photoshop file. Another thing is in Instagram, the header is fixed and the footer, like the tab bar, is fixed. So we're going to be dealing with making it so only this part of the content scrolls, and this sticks to the bottom and this sticks to the top. And there's a few different ways to do that. Other than that, I think it should be pretty straightforward. Something I do want to note about this course, or this class, and probably the next few classes, is we're going to be building this with HTML and CSS. Now, Instagram is actually a native app, and it's actually built in what's called React Native, which is still web-based technologies, but it varies a little bit from HTML and CSS. But this is really just to show the principles. All that being said, there is a web version of Instagram, so some of the stuff that we're doing, is still completely applicable if we were setting out to build a web version of Instagram. All right, so I think we're good to get started here. So I've done a very, very tiny bit of setup here, just so we've done this, countless times now, creating an HTML file, creating a CSS file. And what I'll explain all this stuff again, as we usually do, just for, newcomers. I'm trying to, with this new part of the course, not take a ton of time re-explaining things we have in the past, but I still want to, make it appropriate for people joining without going through all the more intro basic classes. So there'll be some repetition for people that have been here the whole time, but definitely not nearly as in depth. So if you are joining and you're interested and at some point you are a little bit confused about something and why we did something, and you're like, why didn't Tyler explain that more? There's about, I don't know, 7 or 8 videos previous to this that lead us up to essentially what we're doing now. And for the viewers at home, we're going to make this a little bit bigger, come over the stream a little bit more, and all will be good. Okay, so we open up our HTML tag and we close our HTML tag here, although something is wrong here. This should still say HTML. That's just the doc type explanation. Look, I already made a mistake. So we have our opening HTML and closing. We have our opening head tag. Inside there, a few meta tags that you need not to think about too much, just boilerplate stuff. This is essentially saying what char set we're using. Char set is what, kind of like the character set, like, there's different types of languages that have different types of characters. UTF-8's just kind of like the standard, and it includes everything from, letters and numbers and symbols to even emojis fall into the UTF-8 encoding. This is something I don't think we've done before. We have a meta name description, and we're just writing Instagram clone. This is the description, and this is what shows up on Google not in the primary text, that's the title, but kind of like the gray text underneath. And we're also doing this one called Viewport, which I don't think we've done before. And this essentially helps, especially with mobile-friendly websites, to not, just to kind of set it to an automatic scale. Previous to people using this tag, sometimes mobile websites would just load at kind of random sizes. So there was a thing created to go, okay, make the width of it, whatever the device width is, and make its initial scale 1. People on mobile, unless you do some crazy hacks, can always still zoom your website. It's not exactly the same as an app, but we want to set it to 1. We have our title. This is what shows up in the tab bar, and this is what shows up on Google. And then we are importing a style sheet, which I've also created, which is empty, but it is in a folder called CSS and then styles.css. So we can just do the folder name and then the / denoting that's a folder, and then the file inside of it. And that's all we have. So I already have this open in my browser. And it's sweet because it's a nice white page, and we have the title of Instagram clone. And just to prove this is correct, we'll make a paragraph tag and we'll say hello world. You probably see me type hello world a few times. It is, it's basically the go-to, this is my test to make sure things are working. I'm sure there's some really good story behind it. Maybe the very, first text on a computer ever said this, and that's when people do it. It's probably something like that. I don't actually know the full story, and now I'm interested, but I'm not going to waste your time Wikipedia it on your own. Okay, so what we're going to do, like we've done in the past, is just so we don't have to flip back and forth between things, I'm just going to set up my screens really nicely like this. And we have our document on one side, I have this here. I'm also going to close my sidebar because we don't really need it to take up space. We only are working with 2 files. So I close that there. All right, time to get down to business. So the very first thing I want to do, which we've done in the past, is add what's called a CSS Reset. So to get one of those, I just Google CSS Reset. I do this every time, there's no point saving this somewhere because it's just as fast to Google it. And I like the Eric Meyer one, and we're gonna grab it. And even though I just closed this, sorry guys, I'm opening it up again. In my CSS folder, I'm gonna make a new file called reset.css, paste this in, and save. Then we want to include the reset, and we want to include it before our styles.css. So I'm just going to copy that line and change this one to say reset. Boom, boom. And you'll see, oh, we got rid of the text. Hello world. you'll see that a few things happened. Really, the only noticeable thing is we've removed all that margin and padding. Basically, every browser kind of has defaults for CSS. And what a reset does is just sets everything to kind of like the most bare minimum so that, you know, if something looks like this in Safari and you styled it, it'll generally look about the same in Chrome and so forth. So this got rid of all the margin, got rid of all the padding, and made font sizes all consistent. So for instance, now when I make an H1, which generally is really big text, it's actually going to render the same because we're making the reset be like, set everything back to the basics and we want to style it from scratch. It's a nice way to work. There are alternatives, just things called normalizers, and I use those on some projects, but that is, we are just gonna do it more basically for now. The other thing I wanna do, because we're building a mobile website, we're building what looks like an app, seeing it this wide isn't really useful. So if I right click in Chrome or in Safari, I can go into my inspector and there's this little button here. And what it essentially does is puts it in a mobile viewport. And there's a bunch of different options. I'm not sure what the default is, but it usually just remembers your last one. So I like to put it on an iPhone X because that's essentially the phone I have. That way I can, you know, work and have it match the context of what I'm used to. All right, so we have this, we have hello world. I guess I didn't save this file yet. There we go, we have hello. We're getting rid of everything. Okay, great. Now, the next thing we're going to do is include a couple libraries that I like to use. And we've seen both of these before. One of them is called Bootstrap. I think we did a whole class on this specifically. And Bootstrap is essentially it's a CSS and it's a JavaScript library, but we only care for the CSS for this at this time. To give you a lot of stuff that you don't have to build from scratch, things like buttons, things for layout, a lot of utility functions, all this kind of stuff. So we can just go here, go to the documentation, and it's really easy to install, especially if you just want the CSS, because you can actually include, just copy this or click the copy button. And we're gonna keep our reset and then do the Bootstrap and then have our own styles. So if I go back now, now I have nothing in it. So let's put an H1. There we go. So Bootstrap has its own sort of stuff. For instance, if I make a link, for instance, href, I'll just do this number sign thing, do test. You're gonna see links, they kind of have their own sort of style to them, and that's all nice. But you can add extra classes to a lot of these things. For instance, a button class. And all of a sudden, now it doesn't look like it, but there is kind of behind this area that you can click beyond the text, which is normal for a button. But we can also style and say specifically button, so button and then button dash primary. And they like primary, secondary, a bunch of different ones. And look, we got a nice button. It does all the stuff like the hover effects and the push down effects and everything. So we're including Bootstrap because there's gonna be a lot of help that we get from it. So we're gonna delete this stuff. And now I think we have that. The one other library I want to include is Font Awesome. Font Awesome. Font Awesome is a font technically, and it has it's for icons. There's a paid version and a free version. We are going to use the free version, which generally has as much as you need. And the way to include it is installation. I'm just going to search for Font Awesome CDN. So CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. And here we go. It allows you to essentially include things hosted on someone else's server. The advantage of it is, it's like really easy to install. And I'm just going to type this out. It's technically a style sheet. And its href is this thing here. And we can close it. And there we go. So the advantages are it's easier to install. You can, if they do a version update, all you really have to do is change this. Say they put out 4.8, you can change this and boom, you get the new stuff. But if they updated it and you're like, I don't want that version because I'm doing specific things with this one, you don't have to upgrade it. So it keeps things like versioned and nice. The other main advantage is the way that browsers work, they cache content. So if someone went to another site that was including Font Awesome in the same way, they would already have it downloaded in their cache of their computer, meaning instead of it going to have to make a network call and download it, it already has it there. So it basically makes your websites load faster for people that explore a lot. So I am going to show you about Font Awesome real quick. So Font Awesome, generally you put them in I tags, which originally were italic. That's what the I meant, but it changed to, I think it's been kind of changed to icon because there's a new tag, it's not that new, but called EM, which is emphasize. And that's really what you're doing when you're making something italic, you're emphasizing it. So Bootstrap or Font Awesome kind of took the idea of the I to denote an icon. And when you give it a class of FA and then FA dash something else, I can do times, just what I know off the top of my head, you'll see that we get this nice little X here. And if we go to Font Awesome and click on icons, and always make sure, unless you are paying for it, to click the free button so you don't get too excited. They have all these awesome icons. So if we were like, you know what, I'm tired, I can click this guy here and see what the name is. Okay, FA bed. And if we go back here, we'll see this guy in the bed. Yay. Awesome. So we have some icons. We're going to be using that because rather than pulling these guys from Photoshop, we're just going to find similar things that mean the same thing for all these icons. There's about 10 of them or something. Okay, so we have all the libraries installed. I'm going to take a quick step back and explain for new people joining exactly what we're doing starting today. So we are making an Instagram clone. The word clone essentially means we're taking something that exists for learning purposes and going to replicate it to the best of our ability. I think this is a good idea because, the first course, the first part of the course, we were kind of like making things on the fly, which was good for learning stuff. But a lot of the time as a web developer, you're looking at a pre-existing design and turning it into code. So, and I thought, like, why not something that everyone is already familiar with instead of finding some random template of some website that may or may not exist. So we're only going to be focusing on, at least at first, the HTML and CSS. So the layout, the aesthetic, the design of it. If everything goes well and people are following and we're having a good time, in subsequent courses, we may introduce, having some functionality with JavaScript, maybe even some functionality on the server side to actually allow uploads and stuff like that. But that's a long way off. Right now, we're focusing on this. I also want to reiterate that the Instagram app is not built in HTML and CSS. It is a native app. It's built in something called React Native, which has some similarities to HTML and CSS, but it is different. However, Instagram is also a website. You can visit it on your computer and your phone as just Instagram.com, and it doesn't have all the same functionality, but they would have, they're using HTML and CSS for that. So we're not, we're copying it in a slightly relevant way. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna get down to it now. The way we're gonna do it, generally, for the most part, when I build projects, I usually, I'll write a whole bunch of HTML because I, have an idea of how I'm going to style it. And then I'll write all the CSS for that. For purposes of the class, we're going to do this sort of in chunks. So for instance, we're going to start with the header and we're going to do all the HTML for the header. And then we're going to move over to CSS and style it and then do the HTML for the next section. So it's going to be like, you don't have to sit through an hour of just HTML and then an hour of CSS. It's going to be separated out nicely. Okay, so we got our little guy there. We don't need him. We'll save, refresh. We have a blank slate. Again, I'm using Chrome, but I'm turned on, I'm inspecting my element by clicking this, just so we can kind of see it in a more phone layout. Okay, let's start. So what I'll do, just because we don't really have to look at this right now, we're more interested in the Photoshop. I'm going to move, I'm going to minimize this for now. I actually have just the JPEG version of it. We will need the Photoshop when we want to pull out specific things and find font sizes possibly, but for reference, I think this is just as good. So now we can kind of see things all at the same time. web developers find it very helpful to have big monitors or many monitors. I have 3 currently, and I still feel like I could probably use more. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to start by making a div with a class of header. And that's all good. Again, divs are just boxes, they're rectangles that, they have a certain width and they have a certain height. And they're used to organize your content. And this is a perfect time to use a div. So you have a div of header. And inside that header, we're essentially going to have 3 different things. Now, I think what we'll do is actually make 3 containers within here that are kind of like equal size. So we'll kind of have a container here. It should be probably like that. We'll have another one living beside it, another one living beside it. That way we can keep these things in their own spots. So I'm going to make another div. Oops. Div with a class of header left. Header dash left. I'm making these up. There's not necessarily rules. There are some rules, like if you can't have a space, because by having a space, you're essentially saying it has a class of header and a class of left. We specifically want this to be for header left. I'm going to copy this 3 times, header center and header right. Okay, inside header left, what we're going to do is we're going to make a button. Do we want to use a button? Let's just use for now actually a link. And I'm going to make its href just a number sign because we don't really at this point want it to do anything. Number sign is just a nice sort of trick you can use. It essentially points to the same page, but it doesn't actually reload the page. And inside here, all we really need is an icon. So with Font Awesome, we can go I, and we can go class equals FA, and FA dash camera, I'm guessing. We'll just keep that as a guess for now. So our header left, and that's all that's really in header left. Header center, we're going to have a logo in here. And what I'm actually going to use here is rather than another div or a link or anything, I'm going to use an H1. Heading level 1, this is your most important header heading in your whole website because it's the main one. And we're going to write Instagram. Great. Now in header right, we're going to make 2 buttons. So I'm just going to, there's a lot of copying and pasting in coding, and we're going to do that. So this one, we're going to say, I'm going to make it say television. I'm not sure if that's right. We'll look these all up after. Television, might be TV. And I think this one's called like paper plane. Again, these are conventions based on the fact that we're using a library called Font Awesome, paper plane, something like that. Okay, so we have some HTML. That's essentially all the HTML actually we're going to need for the header, at least for now. So I'm going to go back here and refresh and see what it looks like. Hey, we didn't do too bad. I guessed the right Font Awesome icons. So you'll see we have the camera. We have the lovely logo, and we have some other icons. Now, they're not positioned properly, and that's because anytime you have a div, and we have many divs, I'm just going to space stuff out as best as I can, actually. I think that looks good. Divs take up the full width of their container. So technically, this div that is called header is taking the whole width as expected, but so is header left, and so is header center, and so is header right. So because they take up the whole room, when the next piece of content is introduced, we have a bit of an issue. Essentially, it has to go to the next line, and we're going to fix that. So let's actually do that first. So I'm going to go into styles, and we are going to do a couple things here. So I'm going to go dot header, and I'm just going to leave that open. We're going to do stuff to that after, but really what we want to style is header dash left. And rather than it being a width of 100%, which is the default, we're going to make it a width of, I'm going to do 30%, which is just a little bit less than a third. We'll copy this. We'll make header center, and we'll make header right. So I'm going to do 30 and 30, which is 60, meaning we have, if we want this to add up to 100, 30, 40, 30. So we have a little more room to the middle one. So now if we refresh, we're going to notice nothing has changed. And that's because just because we told a div to be a certain width doesn't mean that it is going to behave differently. Divs are block based, if they are only taking up a certain amount of room, they essentially add margin. That's what that orange is there, all the way to the edge of its container. So we haven't solved this yet, but we can. And the way we solve it is, the way we're going to solve it is a few different ways. We're going to use probably the simplest, which is floating. So all we're going to do is actually tell all these elements to float left. And float left basically means find some space, float up there. And we'll see, great, we're getting a little bit closer here. We're obviously not there yet, but it's getting there. Something I want to do here, because this is pretty repetitive, and we're going to do something called a refactor, just to essentially make this, you know, if we decided to make a change, we'd have to do it in 3 spots. So what we're actually going to do is go header left, comma, header right, comma, header, sorry, I want to keep it in the same order, so center. And what this is saying is essentially like declaring these all separately, but we're going to apply the same to all of them. Now, the only difference between these ones is the fact that center was 40. So we can say, let's set center to 30, but then after we can say header center width 40%. And we can get rid of all this, which I will in a moment. So this is a very common practice. It's known as cascading. In fact, CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Basically, a lot of the time you'll set sort of a default on things and then override specific things. Now, this has to come after this. If this was to come before, then this would get overwritten. Everything is read in order. Now, that's called, in some sense, specificity. And there's a few more, it gets a little more complicated than just the order. There are ways that, you know, that doesn't count, but for our purposes, and for today, just assume you have to write things in the order that you want to override them. So this should be exactly the same, because all we did was a refactor. So it's a lot less CSS. It's really nice. So let's get an idea of what's actually going on here, because it kind of just looks like a mishmash. We're going to temporarily give this a background color. You'll see me do this a lot. And we'll use yellow today, just so we can kind of see, oh, what's happening? Oh yes, wonderful, wonderful times. I forgot and we went over this when we talked about floating the first time. Floating has this sort of caveat to it. Because you're telling things to keep going, its container essentially gets a bit confused. It doesn't know its own height because the things inside of it essentially can continuously go on forever. To combat that, it's good practice that after all the items that you want to float, so we have this floating, we have header center floating, and we have header right floating, we want to add a div, oops, and I'm going to give it a class of clear, which is just my own convention, or a pretty common convention. And in our styles, and I'm going to do this actually in a different part, and we're going to organize this a bit better, but I'm going to make a little section called just global, or I'm going to call it helpers. That's kind of what this is. Oops. And we're going to do .clear, so things with the class of clear, and we're going to say clear both. And all that means is whenever you see something with a class of clear, it's going to stop that floating from happening. And as soon as we do that, we'll see the yellow background's back, as it should be. Okay, so we can see the header automatically. We never told the header how much height to have. And basically what's happening is its content is essentially dictating its height. We could set a height, but that's generally not the best practice because, you know, why not make it fit based within your things? So the height of it is, that's probably like 40 pixels or something. And that's just because this text right here has probably a font size of 2.5 rem, which means it's 2.5 times your base font size. Base font size is probably 14 pixels, so we can do the math, but essentially, if we look over here, we can actually see it's, okay, 48 pixels tall, but it also has, where do we have? Yeah, there's a little bit of margin on the bottom of it too, so it's sticking. Okay, so we're getting there. It's not perfect. In fact, you know, one major problem is the header center, actually, the logo doesn't even fit within it. It's sticking out of it. And I can kind of show that, I mean, I'll just show it here, yeah. you can kind of see that blue box is where that's the box that we called header-center, and the text is coming out of it. And that's because that font size is simply too big. So let's do some stuff to that. I'm going to go header center H1, and we're going to make its font size, let's just go like 16 pixels. There we go. That's probably a little small. Cool. Now, something else I want to do with the header center is, so what's happening at, this isn't centered. And the only reason is the actual header center part centered, but the text inside of it isn't. So we're going to go text align center on the container itself, the header center container. That'll get things a little bit nicer. Something else I just want to do is actually just add some padding in general to the whole header. So what I'm going to do is go padding top, and we're going to open up our thing here and get an idea. We'll finesse stuff after, but I'm just going to kind of guess just to speed stuff up. But yeah, that's maybe like 16, maybe like 8 pixels. So heading top 8 pixels, padding left. So that's the distance between here and here. And we'll say it is a little bit more. Let's do 16. Padding, I also want the same padding on the bottom as I do on the top. Padding right, same as the left. So now, and we'll go back to our website that doesn't look as good as that yet. We'll see that stuff got a little bit more spaced out. So there's padding on the top, padding on the bottom. Okay, something I'm gonna do, just because it's kind of messing up some stuff. And I think this is probably better because we are kind of trying to build something from scratch. I'm actually going to remove Bootstrap. So remember we included that Bootstrap library, which had those helpers. We're just going to get rid of it. So I'm just doing Command X, just like cuts it from the document to my clipboard. And then we'll see where a little bit more, things make a little more sense because stuff wasn't really looking centered, and that's because Bootstrap has like automatic margin on the bottom of things and that kind of stuff. So we're like, cool, good to go. Just clearing the playing field once again. Okay, so yeah, we're getting better now. I think the Instagram logo can actually be more, and that's pretty good. We'll deal with fonts shortly. Okay, the next thing we want to do is deal with these icons. So the icon is in our header left. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to try and keep things in the same order. So I have header left, then we do center, then we do all this stuff for right. And we're going to style the I specifically. Oops, sorry, I did that wrong. Header left, I. So any I's within it. And remember, the I is the this icon. I used to mean italic, but that's been changed to EM. A lot of the times still by default right as italic, but our font library, our icon library is expecting an I with a certain class on it. And let's just make its font size. Let's just try some things, 24 pixels. Let's see if that feels better. Yeah, I'd say that feels good. So yeah, we did that. I can copy and paste this and do header right icons. And that looks good as well. Cool. And wait, were these inside? I'm gonna get rid of the links for now, just because they're adding some underlines and stuff, and we don't actually need them, at least at this point. So we simplified a bit. It's just the icons. It's not wrapped in an anchor tag, which is gonna make them black by default and get rid of that ugly underline. Okay, so that's good. This one looks, more or less perfect. Whereas these ones need to go this way. So to handle that, we're gonna go .header right. And we've done a text align center, we've seen that, but we can also do text align right. And that's gonna push it right to the edge. The only reason it's not right to the edge is because we've said we want some padding on the left of 16 and 16. And in fact, looking at it now, we should probably just keep them all as 8. That looks almost there. This right here is super repetitive. We're basically saying like 8, 8, 8, 8. So there's a better way. We can actually just do the shorthand of padding and just say 8 pixels. And that will automatically essentially say 8 top, 8 bottom, 8 left, 8 right. So cleaner CSS. and it looks exactly the same. I feel like we're pretty close. I think there could be some extra spacing between these guys. So what we can do on our header right icons is just give them a margin left of, let's just try like 6 pixels. Actually, I'll do a pretty big number just to show what's happening, and then we'll reduce it. So that moves that over. Now, what's actually happening is both icons are being given a margin on the left. So this one and this one, which works for our purposes because there's not a lot of things in here. And we're going to keep it that way. But that's why they spread out, is we were saying, you know, both of them have a margin left. So they're kind of like shimmying the dudes over. 20 is way too much. Let's just do something like 6. All right, we're getting closer. Getting closer now. This yellow is disgusting. It was meant for debugging, and super helpful to do because let's kind of see everything. And what we're going to do is go into our Photoshop file, and we're going to see what color the header actually is. And it looks like it's almost white. FA, FA, FA. It's very close to white, but it's not quite. So rather than this background color, we're going to go background color FA, FA, FA with the number sign in front of it, the hashtag. And now we actually have the appropriate color. Now, something else that they're doing is, and if we zoom, it makes it even more clear, there's this little bit of a border. And we can grab that guy too, just with our eyedropper in Photoshop. And we can go back here and we can tell it border bottom. So border bottom, you say you give it its size first. Oops. 1 pixel. You give it its 1 pixel. You give it what type of border. In this case, you want a solid border as opposed to like dashed. And then we give it a color. We save. And now we have this nice little line here. It's just weird. Does it look like there's drop shadow happening? It's probably just an illusion because we did not do any drop shadow. Yeah, just an illusion. Okay, so getting closer with the header. Now, you know, they got this really nice logo here. We making a clone could decide, you know, to make our own logo, but we're gonna pull this one. And rather than trying to find a font and embed it, we're gonna pull this and embed it directly into our site. So quick little Photoshop tutorial. I'm gonna copy this, Command C. I'm gonna go File, New. And it automatically sets it to whatever my clipboard is. So I'm gonna go Create, I'm gonna paste, and I'm gonna get rid of the background because we want it to actually have a transparent background so that we can put it on anything and it will look good. Then I go to File, Export, Save for Web, Legacy, if you're on the newest Photoshop, otherwise it's just Save for Web. And I change this to PNG, and that's because PNGs have transparency. Those little, you know, we got that little grid there, which is not actually in the image, it's just denoting that that's transparent. If this was a JPEG, it's gonna force a white background. JPEGs don't have what's called an alpha channel. If we did GIF, we actually do have an alpha channel, but generally it's not always, alpha channels on PNGs are a range. You can say something slightly transparent, fully transparent, not transparent, whereas GIF is either like it's a color or it's fully transparent. So a lot of the times it's good to stick to PNGs because sometimes images have, you know, a nice little like anti-aliasing happening. So I'm going to find my project. Nope, not in there. And this is equivalent to what we have open in VS Code right now. And I'm gonna make a new folder called images. And in here, I'm gonna put the word logo, logo.png. And if we go back to our code and open this up, we should see that that new folder is there. If it didn't show up, sometimes it's because it's not really like watching the directory, and there's this little refresh button you can click in VS Code. And then we'll refresh it. But it's here, so we're good. And what we're gonna do is the most semantically correct way to do this. So we've written the word Instagram, and I'm actually gonna keep it that way. Because search engines and stuff will, you know, look at that and be like, oh, that's like their, you know, main title. Whereas if we remove this and just threw an image in, it doesn't have a way to understand the context of it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into my header center, and we already have this declared, the H1. And what we're going to do first is go text indent -9999 pixels, just like a really large number. And that's essentially going to hide that text from the screen because it's like way, way over here. It's gone. But from a bot's point of view, Google, whatever, they still think it's there and are like, great, this is really, we understand this website. What we're going to do instead, or including that, is put a background image there. I don't think we've even done background images yet. We've been putting image tags in as is. Background images are great, especially for purposes like this. So what we can do is we can say background-image URL, and now we have to tell it the name of our image, but not just the name, we have to tell it where to find it. And the CSS file lives in this directory called CSS, but the images is in a separate directory. So see the, we have our index.html, we have this, that's where our CSS is. Why is it so slow? And we have this. So what we have to do is actually tell it, go back a directory. So .. go back a directory, go into the images directory, and give me that logo.png. And if we refresh now, we're gonna kind of see it's coming together. There we go, we have that. Now, our logo itself, we can, in Photoshop, find out its width. It's 207 by 59. The problem is that this Photoshop file is actually done at what's called 2x. It's double the real size of the pixels in the pixels you use in coding when you're saying, px. So we want to kind of do a little bit of math here. And where did it go? We need to, this guy. We want to make its width half of this and half of this. Now, a bit of a problem that I'm seeing here is half of 207 isn't really a full number. And it's always good to work in full numbers. So I'm going to do a quick little thing in Photoshop, and I'm just going to edit my canvas size, which doesn't actually stretch the image, it's just changing the canvas. I'm going to make it 208 by 60. So that's just like adding 1 pixel on the right, 1 pixel on the bottom, kind of. And I'll force it to do it that way. So now the good thing is, if I'm going to resave this just by doing, I did the shortcut just out of habit, but file, save for web. And I'm going to replace this file. And replace it. So now we have slightly better numbers to work with. So the width is 208. So we actually want to tell the browser, render this at 104. So let's do that. So we want our H1 width of 104 pixels. And similarly, its height is set to 60, so divide by 2, 30 pixels. Now, when we do that, it's not going to look any different, or not that much different. And we'll fix that next. So essentially, one solution to this is we could have exported this graphic at half the size, and everything would have worked perfectly, except for the fact of these things called retina screens, which most screens are these days, especially phone screens. There are actually a lot of phone screens now are 3x, not even 2x. So we could have done this even better if we had a higher res one. But when we're talking pixels in web, we're not actually talking about your device pixels. We're talking about units. I'm not sure the correct word at this exact moment, but on a 2x screen, when we're saying 104 pixels across, it's actually covering 208 real hardware pixels. So knowing this, we can design all of our images at twice the resolution, and then tell the background to render it at half the width, and it will make it look nicer than if we were just using a lower res image. So to combat that, what we can do is actually a couple options. We'll start with the most basic. We can say background size. No, that's not the one. 100%. Yeah, background size 100%. So what that is saying is fill up my container with whatever this background image and stretch it, the way that it should be, and that is all good and fine. So that's one way to do it. What I generally do is there's these awesome helper, it used to always be percents, and it was complicated because sometimes you have weird edge cases. So CSS invented this idea called cover and contain. Contain basically says fill fill the box with my image so that I can see the whole thing. And cover, in our case, is going to look the same, but cover is similar to that, except it makes sure that your entire container has some of the image in it, and it will get rid of, it'll hide the rest of it. In this case, it's hard to sort of show an example. I'm sure we'll see a better example later, but we're going to do contain, because technically, no matter we always want to just make sure we see that whole image. Otherwise, we don't want stuff to be cut off. So, okay, we're getting there. Let's see what's going on though, because this doesn't appear centered to me. And the reason for that is our H1 itself, even though we were telling it at one point to have a text, we were saying text align center, we don't really have text in here anymore. So we have to tell the H1 to center itself. And rather than using text align, because it's not really text anymore, we're gonna go margin, margin, do it this way, margin left, auto, margin right, auto. And now, it's looking a bit nicer. It's centered, and basically what the left auto and right auto are doing is it's kind of automatically figuring out what's the best, place for me to be, and it will just keep those even so that things get centered. Okay, now I also feel like it's kind of close to the top here. And I think actually in general, I feel like all these things are a little close to the top. So to combat that, we're just going to change the padding of the header altogether. So in our header, we are saying padding 8, which is good, but I'm going to then override specifically top padding, and let's make that twice as much just to see how it looks. It looks pretty good. I think it's probably going to be something like 12 to really get in that sweet spot. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I also feel like the left and right. Actually, I think in general we can increase the padding. So let's do padding. All the padding is 12, and then make the padding top something like 16. There we go. So we're off to the races here. We have a header. It's looking great. Okay, we'll do a quick review of everything because we finished one component. So we have our HTML file. We're including our reset.css. We're including Bootstrap, Font Awesome, which is giving us those awesome icons for free. And we're including our own custom style sheet. We made a div with a class of header. And inside there, we had 3 columns, essentially, a header left, header center, and header right, and the appropriate content within. And we put this clear. And this is essentially making sure that after we're done, we're saying like, we're not floating anymore, stop floating. We want things to just return back to normal. And that's why we have this clear here. And in our styles, and let's open up both side by side rather. And I'm gonna do a bit of organization here before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So these are what are called Css comments. They're just notes to the developer, notes to yourself, notes to other people that you're working on to keep things organized. So yeah, we have this one helper so far. There'll be many more, I'm sure. And this is that clear we were talking about that tells things to stop floating. And then, yeah, everything to do with our header. So the header itself, giving it that background color and the padding and this over here. So yeah, we have a lot more room today because we're not styling a full website. And that border bottom, telling it 1 pixel solid and this color. And then we told all of our columns to have a width of 30% and float them left so that they sit beside each other. Then we did we said for icons of header left, we want to have the font size of 24 pixels. For header right, same thing, but we want to have that margin left happening. Header center, we're actually overriding this here by telling its width actually be 40% and the text align to be center. So the float still applies because we didn't override float, but we overrode width. So it's 30, 40, 30. And then we styled our H1, and that was a fun little trick. If I didn't have this line in here, you'd actually see that the text of Instagram is showing up here. This hid it from the view, just an arbitrary large number, just so that we can still keep it semantically correct. It still, looks like valid HTML with text, but we're overriding it and giving it a background, setting its width, all that kind of stuff. And then header right, we were like, let's align right so that, they go that way. Oh, right. Awesome. For those who don't know, today's class is a 2-hour class. Should you like to stay? So I know we're 10 minutes away from the normal end, but because it's Good Friday and we're starting a school project, we are doing it for longer. There will be an intermission in about 10 minutes for anyone that needs to, you know, get some coffee, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. Okay, so let's continue. Let's go back to our Photoshop file and we'll look at what's here. Okay, this next part seems pretty fun. We got these little guys, which we're going to style appropriately. So yeah, I think we're happy with, this looks pretty close, right? I know it's not pixel perfect, like it's definitely not pixel perfect by any means. And in fact, I think if we get rid of some padding on the bottom, let's fix that now. Header, padding, let's just do padding bottom, which is normally 12, and we're going to tell it, let's do 8 pixels. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not perfect. I haven't gone in and measured things, but you know, you get the gist. Okay, so we're going to be making a whole new section now, and we're going to start just with the HTML like we did before. So after this header, and let me pull up this guy again, and try and get everything on the screen a bit better. Close enough. Okay, and we're going to make a new div with a class of, I'm going to call it story-list. Makes sense. And in here, we are going to essentially make these guys. Now, we're just going to make one first. There's no point duplicating a bunch of HTML when they're so similar, because we're going to want to style it. And if we decide, oh, we should have maybe done the HTML a little bit differently, we don't want to have to erase everything and redo it. So we're just going to worry about the first one right now, the one that says your story. So I'm going to make another div inside there with a class of, and I'm going to just call it story list item, story-list-item. And inside here, what are we going to need? We're going to need a, I'm kind of just making this up as I go. Let's call this image container. And inside there, we're going to have an image tag. And I'm just going to keep it source blank for now. We'll come back to that when we start styling. So we have that. And then underneath the image container, we also need to have a class of, let's call it username container. And I will put in this one, we'll just put some text. Your story. I'm thinking about this now. Originally, I think I was, yeah. You know what, let's keep this simple. We'll call it image and we'll call it username. We don't need to have the word container. Okay, and I think other than us duplicating this and doing some differences to show, you know, this live badge and that kind of stuff, that is all we really need. So let's do that. And I'm going to open up my CSS again. Oops. No, I want my CSS on this side, and we'll keep the HTML here so we can see it. And let's make a whole new section here called story list. And what we want to do is start by targeting the story list itself, this guy here. And for now, let's just give it, actually not even for now, let's give it its actual background color. So I'm gonna go into Photoshop and we're gonna grab this color here. It looks like it's actually the exact same as the header. All good. That was worth it to check. And what else does this thing have? It also has a border bottom. I think that's lighter. Yeah, definitely a lighter color. So let's not just assume it's the same and try and grab it. There we go, DB. So we're gonna do the border bottom, 1 pixel, solid, DB. And if we go back to our site now, we'll see we got some cool stuff happening here. All right, now what else do we want to do with this? We want to make sure we have some padding. So this time let's measure, because this part needs to look perfect. So I'm just going to actually measure this now. Because this is a 2x design, it's telling me the height is 14, but I can do the math there and know that that should be 7. So it's 7 on the top. So I'm going to go padding top 7 pixels. And I expect it's going to be the same on the bottom because everything seems centered. So let's just copy that. And let's see what it is on the left. And that is 17. It's probably 16, really. I'm probably not getting it exact. 16. So we want that to say 8 then. Padding left, 8 pixels. And even though we can't see it, ultimately when we scroll over here, we're still going to want a nice little bit of padding on the right-hand side too. So we are going to include that, 8 pixels. So when we go back here, we'll see it's spaced out a little bit nicer and everyone is happy. Okay, now we need to do some stuff. So let's style the list item itself. So I'm gonna go story-list space story list item. So styling any story list items inside the story list. And we'll go back to our Photoshop and let's just consider how wide these things are. And what I'm actually gonna do is try and find like that center point between one of these guys and to the center point here, because that's really the width that I want. So that thing's kind of, you know, stacked nicely. And it's looking like 168 pixels, which again, we're gonna be dividing by 2. So let's give it a width of 168 divided by 2 is 84 pixels, right? Yes. Give it a width. We could also give it a height, but my thoughts are with the height, it's going to automatically be set anyways when we start to give the images, when the images get in there. So let's just refresh. This shouldn't look any different yet because we just told this thing have this width. Cool. So now we want to style that image inside of it. So I'm just going to copy and paste this guy and go .image, and it's going to be really hard to see what this image looks like without an image. So let's open up one of our favorite websites, placekitten.com. So this is placekitten.com. It's just a place to get pictures of cats without having to download them. You just post them. Click this example. And I want one just to make this more efficient. We'll make one that's actually a square. So the URL is basically just width/height of the image that I want. So we're going to copy this to our clipboard. And where we made that image, we're going to paste that in as the source. And we're going to refresh. And this is going to look a little bit wacky now because images by default just show up whatever size they are. So that was a 300 pixel image. We see 300 pixels. But we don't want that. We want these to be a specific width. And I'm going to do it from, first we're going to find out what the width of this is. It's 110, so 55. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to copy it. First, we're going to style the image inside that dot image. So notice there's no dot here because we're styling a specific tag, not a class. And I want that width to be 55 pixels. And by default, when you set the width of something, it's going to automatically set its height proportionally to it. So that's what happened. And that's good. But another thing we want to do is it's a circle. So there's a really cool trick to deal with making things circles, and we can go border radius 50%. And that, just to kind of, for people who haven't seen this before, you can do, border radius 5 pixels, and that just gives it like, a little bit of a thing. And as you increase this number, 25, it's going to be a little more rounded. Like that's almost a perfect circle versus, 15. And you could do the math and you could kind of be like, okay, whatever half of 55 is really what's going to make a circle. But it's easier just to say 50% because then if you change this, this will always be a circle. Cool. We got our circle happening. That looks good. Now there's a little bit more, and we're looking, I think, actually at this one right now. So you have the actual image, and then you have sort of this like area here. And luckily, we already in HTML are accounting for this area. So let me copy this color. And back over here, we're going to give this a background color of FA. Let me close this guy. And if we refresh, nothing's going to change. And that's because this container, the container that we called image, which has an image inside of it, doesn't, it's only going to be the same size of the image because we're not telling it to have any padding. So let's give it some padding. And I'm gonna open Photoshop again and figure out basically what is, between here and here roughly. It's looking like 10 pixels or 5 if we're dividing by 2. So we're just gonna say padding of 5 pixels all the way around. So now it doesn't look a whole lot different except stuff kind of shifted. And the other thing that's missing is now this border. So I dropped that border, which looks like C7. So on the image border, 1 pixel, I'm pretty sure, solid, and that. Cool, we got that happening. Obviously not correct yet. 2 things are going wrong. 1, it's not conforming to the circle, and that's because similarly to having a border radius on the image, we also want a border radius on the image container. So doing that. And then, yeah, what the heck is going on here? Let's find out. What is going on here? Okay, I have a plan. So is it because we made the width of this 84? I don't think that was, no, that is correct, that is correct. Okay, so we are telling the width of the image to be 55, which is, seems like a fine way to do this, but I'm gonna just temporarily set this to 55. Okay, we're closer now. And I'm just gonna make the width of this 100%. Okay, closer. Let's also give this a height of 55 pixels, so we know that's what it is. So now it looks much better. So basically what we did is, rather than setting the width and the height of the image itself, we're setting the width and height of its container. Now the 55 is the way the box model works. That's essentially from inside its padding to its padding. So really the width of this whole circle is 55 plus 5 plus 5, because there's padding left and padding right. So it's really, if we measured this, would be 65 across. And that's all good. And then what we said with the image, like rather than having this as a hard-coded number where we have to calculate the width minus that padding, we just say 100%, and it just fills its box as it should. Yay. So we have this cat. It looks cool. Okay, the last thing of this one to do is the this text right here. So let's open up the Photoshop file and take a look at the text. Let's see what this file is using. Oh, great, it's using Arial, and that's a font that most computers have, so we don't really have to worry about embedding a web font or anything like that yet. And in fact, we might not have to. So what I want to do is, I'm going to make a new section called Global, because I think, and when you look at this design compared to ours, this is a serif font, and in the design, virtually everything seems to be a sans serif font, Arial specifically, at least in this Photoshop file. So we're just going to go body, and we're going to say anything with the body unless we decide to override it. We want to make its font family Arial. Now with fonts, and we've been through this before, it's always good to show fallbacks, assign a fallback. So what this line will do is saying Arial, but if we don't have Arial, use Helvetica. And if we don't have Helvetica, just use whatever sans serif font your computer or device has. 99.9% of the time, everyone's gonna have one of these. So changing that just all of a sudden made this already look nicer. So that's good. So we just set that globally, meaning everything is by default gonna be that font unless we say otherwise. So we're gonna go back down here and we're gonna style the username. So we're copying this again and space username. And we want to do some things to this because it looks like I'm imagining that font's a little bit too big. Let's see. So they're using a font size of 22. And again, this design is at 2x. So we're going to make it 11, half of that. Font size 11 pixels. Looking better. Then we definitely want to text align of center so that it centers nicely. That still doesn't look perfect, and we'll figure out why in a moment, but we know we want to center, so we'll keep that. I also believe there's a little bit of padding, between this and this, which we're not getting right now. It looks like 14-ish pixels, so we'll say 7. And I'm just gonna say padding top, 7 pixels. Space it out a bit more. Okay, so why, when we said center, it's not really actually centering? And the reason is the box that this is inside, that box is definitely wider than the image. Interesting. I think we might have mismeasured something because we were saying a width of 84. Oh, right. I remember why. And in fact, we're going to deal with this a different way. So what we did, we measured from here to here, which I was thinking would be a good idea, but now I'm realizing like that becomes problematic because then we have to center stuff between, and that would be fine. But then the first one, we don't want to have that extra padding. So let's just figure out what the width of literally this whole box is. It's 130, which is 65 pixels if you divide by 2. So we're going to make this 65. And I think that was the root of some of our other problems happening earlier. So now stuff looks a little bit more centered inside this guy. Yeah, pretty good. I'm seeing, and it's hard to tell, I'm sure, on the stream, on this small screen, but I'm seeing that it's not exactly centered. I'm gonna make it like 68. Cool. Let's just make it a nice 70. And in fact, let's give this a background color, just temporarily, of red. This is always nice, so you can kind of see what's happening. So you'll see that, okay, yeah, I'm definitely overdoing it a bit. 68, because I want these, I want the red to line up nicely. Okay, before we take the break, I just want to get rid of that. And actually, yeah, this is actually perfect time to take a break. We have the start of something. Yeah, I'm gonna just say 5 minutes, just for people that need to take a quick break and don't want to miss anything, as well as myself. I would like a quick washroom break. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm gonna just put a nice message on my screen in case new people come in, just to say back in 5. There we go, look at that. Cool. All right, BRB. Okay, I realized I didn't look at the clock when I stepped away for 5 minutes, but let's say it was 5 minutes. Hopefully you're all back. If you're not back, please let me know in the chat. All right. As we get back into it, just wanted to kind of recap what we're doing. We are essentially working on building this Instagram clone, which we have this nice PSD that we're working off of as a reference that I found online for free. I forget exactly where I found it, but I think I Googled Instagram Photoshop file and I found it. So yeah, we're only focusing on the HTML and CSS, at least for now, but depending on how things go in further classes, you know, we might do some more and do some JavaScript, and who knows where we'll go with it. It's gonna be fun. Also, just, yeah, I have the chat open here, so if anyone does have questions about things or is stuck on something, I don't expect people to be following along, but I know it does happen sometimes. So yeah, just let me know in the chat if there's something weird, and I'll try and sort you out. It's a little bit difficult through chat to be like, because I can't see your screen, but you know, I don't want you to get stuck if you are. Otherwise, you know, if you do want to follow along, but you feel like the pace is a little fast, because I am trying to do a lot in today's class, even though it is 2 hours. These are going up on YouTube. It's actually streaming live to YouTube right now. Hi, YouTube. And you can always watch it at your own pace and pause and play and pause and play. Okay, let's get back into it. Okay, the one thing we didn't actually do was deal with this color here, but we're going to handle that in a bit when we have a few different ones, because the color we're using, the black, I'm pretty sure, maybe this isn't black. It doesn't look like it is. Oh, it's not. I'm going to copy this color in my clipboard, and I'm going to change the color, but we're going to globally, because I feel like, and we'll find out later, but I feel like this is probably the default font color throughout it. So I'm going to just go color #sign this that I pasted, just to set everything to that color. So now we're going to see it's just a little bit lighter, a little bit nicer on the eyes. In fact, generally in web development apps, black and white are pretty rare. It's usually just slightly off from a black or a white, but that will change soon. We're going to start seeing a lot more black in interfaces. The reason for that, this is just a fun side note I thought of explaining now, are OLED screens. So the way a screen works on your computer, on your phone, on your TV, there's a backlight behind your TV. So even if you're looking at a screen, assuming your screen's on and it's fully black, it's actually using the exact same amount of power as if it was fully white. And what's happening is the crystals in your LCD screen are being twisted to close off light. So by default, if they're not twisted, all your backlight is shining through. And if it is, when they are fully twisted, it's black. Although a lot of the time, you know, you look at the screen, it's never fully black. It's usually a dark gray. And that's because light leaks. What OLED screens are, and there's a few different types, essentially they are actually a separate light for each pixel. Instead of the pixel just being like a hole, think of it as its own little light bulb. Meaning, with an OLED screen, black is the light actually fully off. So when you're looking at an OLED screen and everything's black, you're actually using less power because all those lights are essentially off. It also gives a lot more contrast because there's no light leak because each pixel is its own. So what I'm kind of saying is, especially with dark mode, you know, I think when dark mode started to become a thing for more people, I think I saw a lot of internet chatter being like, oh, like power is being saved. And it's like, no, that's not true, because your screen is still using the same amount of light. It's just blocking it out. But with OLED screens, we are going to, I think, see more things supporting dark mode, because it is actually better for power. And I think we're actually going to see black being used more, because, you know, if you say you're watching something and on this screen here, a video, and it's just in this little spot and the rest, you know, it could just be black. Why are we wasting power? So that was my tangent on OLED screens. Okay, so we got this color, slightly almost black. And like I said, I know that really the one that says your story, at least in this design, is this gray, but we're gonna deal with that later. So the next thing we want to do is get at least one more of these guys. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And we're going to keep everything the same, except I'm going to write like the word username here. You know, username 1. We'll just say username. And we're going to refresh. And it looks awful. Actually, it's okay. But they're not going beside each other. And we know why. It's because, you know, they're not floating. This div is taking up its full width. So what we want to do is go back down here. And in our story list items, which we've already defined the width, we want to tell them to float left. Sorry, float left. And there we go. Now they're nice and beside each other. Two weird things happened. One, look, this is like the container that we're working with, which used to go under here, but it's being reset. And that's because when you float things, I don't know the best way to explain it, but basically your browser gets a little bit confused. So we need to use one of those clears again, similar to that what we had up in our header. So I'm just going to copy that, and I just want to put it after my last one of my floating items, and that'll get us back to here. The other thing is these shouldn't be touching. There's definitely some space between them, and we're going to solve that by figuring out how much space roughly. It's looking like 36 pixels divided by 2 is 18. Yeah. So we want to say we're going to give these a margin right of 18 pixels. So that will space them out nicer. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, that seems kind of more spread out than I expected it to. I wonder why. Maybe it's just because we don't have this colorful thing yet. So we'll keep it as is. I'm pretty sure I measured it accurately. The reason I'm doing right and not left is if we did left, the first one would also have that, and it would, you know, we want that right where it is. So we're giving it margin right. So as we see, we'll see this nice orange thing that's showing us where the margin is, and yeah, good to go. So we have that. We have the word username, and I notice something seems off. It could just be because I'm looking at this at a weird size. No, maybe it's right. It seemed like the font's a little bit smaller. Like I kind of think it is. So I'm going to change the font size just to 12 pixels. It's going to look, in my opinion, a little bit better, I think. I also feel like these should be closer, and that's just maybe in my own head. So we had a padding top of 7. I'm going to make it 5. Yeah, just get a little bit closer. Okay, so we're going to ignore this live thing at first. We may come back to it, but let's get a colored thing around this. So what I want to do, because essentially there's different states of these graphics, right? Sometimes it's just empty like that, and that means like they don't have a new story for you to watch, which as you know on Instagram, sometimes they have this color, and that's essentially saying there's a color. And if we were to just, you know, style these things in a sense to say, put this color around it, all of them are going to have it. So we want to denote a very specific thing. So what I'm going to do is a cool convention, and I'm going to have this class, and it's still going to be called, so it's story list item, but it's also going to be story list item dash dash has story, because semantically that's really what we're saying. And what we want to do is only style ones with that color that have this specific class. So we're going to look for story item, and we're going to essentially grab this, and we're going to grab and copy paste this, and I'm putting it there. Now you'll notice there's no space here. And this might be a little bit confusing. And the reason is, anytime you have a space, you're kind of saying like a child of that element, And we're doing that a lot here, right? We're saying story list has a child named story list item, space has a child named dot image, has a child with an image tag. What we're actually doing here is saying we want to look at story list items specifically that also have the story list item has story. So it's not a child, it is the same element. And essentially we want to override things. And just to show this, first, let's just give this a background color of red, just to make sure what we're doing makes sense. So see, it only got applied to this one. It still kept all the other same settings because it is still a member of the story list item, but we want to specifically give it a background red. But that's not really what we want to do. We want to give it that nice colorful border. I'm trying to think the best way to do this. In my head, probably the simplest way would be to go in this Photoshop and actually pull out, you know, this guy here and this graphic. It's hard to just grab on its own, but I'm sure I could. And just put that behind it. That would work fine, but if we ever wanted to change the size of something, like we'd have to re-export that graphic. So we need to look into possibly a better way to do this. Also, I believe, if I remember Instagram correctly, like these things kind of animate. So using a graphic might be, keep us from being able to do that. So I'm going to look up something because I don't remember how to do this, but I'm pretty sure it's possible. Css Gradient border. Here we go. This is a website called CSS Tricks. My pal, Chris Coyer, he's not really my pal, but I've been following this website for probably 12 years. He's just really on top of the curve of like CSS stuff. And, it started as CSS Tricks, but he does a lot of like JavaScript stuff too. Look, he almost kind of already has this like thing we're trying to do, which is perfect. So here we go. Chris Coyer is also the guy who invented this amazing website called CodePen, which is its own site where you can essentially make, write HTML, write CSS, and write JavaScript and have it all appear here. And it allows you to actually go and embed it inside your own blog or whatever, which is super helpful. And it's fully interactive even inside the blog. So yeah, he's great. Really good articles, really good tips, and still posting things to this day. So we could read through this article. I could read it aloud to you, and all this kind of stuff. But we can probably just look at an example. Now I'm seeing. So let's just go to this one, so we're not cluttered with stuff. I just want to make sure this will do what we want. I'm going to get rid of this is interactive, and I'm not changing it for the world. I'm just changing it for me. Don't worry, not deleting your code. I put my name in there, and I think you can. Oh, it just automatically runs. I just want to make sure that this approach will allow us to essentially have border radius. So if you look at HTML, there's the module border wrap, and inside it is the module. And I want to make sure if we were to do something like background size 50%, if this will, oh no, sorry, totally wrong thing. Border radius, because if this doesn't work, it means what we're doing will not work for circles. Come on, I figured these kind of hacks are never as good as one would want. So I noticed kind of skimming in his article that he has this example. Then there's, and he's talking about, I guess it's a challenge. So this other guy, Stephen Shaw, had an example of tackling border radius. So let's open up this CodePen. I'm gonna leave the one I had. So I'm seeing some border radius, so that's good. It's not a circle yet, but let's put this back to kind of what we had. And we should see something for border radius. Border radius, where is it? Border radius, he's doing 1em. I just want to see if we do 50%, will it become a circle? It does. Now, it's not actually a circle because the height of this is different than the width. So it's making it an oval, but this should work for our purposes. So I am going to copy, not all of this. I don't think, I just want kind of the gradient box part of it. And I'm just going to pull this into, I'm going to put this in, this is kind of a helper to me. We're going to make this because it's going to be used in different parts of the site, not just here. I'm just going to paste this in, and for reasons I'm not going to explain now, I'm going to reorganize it. Oh. I'm going to get rid of, he had some comments in here, but the comment style is different than we want. 3 pixels border. Oops. I'm just changing stuff, and I'll explain it. He has some variables. Essentially, what this is over here is actually, this isn't actually pure CSS. This is what's known as SCSS. It's a pre-compiler for CSS that has a lot of awesome features like variables, like mix-ins, functionalities, inheritance. It also may compile to CSS because that's all the browser understands. But it's a great tool. But it's beyond the scope of what we're doing right now because, especially if you're following at home, it's not, your browser doesn't understand it. So there is what's called a build process. You have to essentially compile your code to the browser, and I don't want to walk anyone through that right now. Okay, so we have this thing called gradient box. Did you have anything else in here? Oh, and then the gradient box before. Okay, so there's some errors I'm seeing, and that's because he was using this variable called border, which I'm going to change, and I think that's pretty good. So I'm saving that, and then what we're actually going to do, I'm still going to keep this like this because there's probably stuff we're going to want to do aside from the gradient, but we're going to add another class called gradient box. Actually, let's rename it gradient circle. It makes more sense for our purposes. So that means I'm going to change this to say circle and this to say circle. And I hope that gets us closer to what we're trying to do. I didn't save my index HTML. Oh, not even close. Why? Let's go back to the code pen. We had this, we had something inside of it. Oh, there's all these like max width. There's probably a bunch of stuff we don't need. 9 items. I'm gonna get rid of the width because we've already set stuff on widths. I'm gonna get rid of the margin. I'm gonna get rid of the max width. I'm gonna get rid of the padding. I'll keep the position relative. Keep border width 3 pixels. Change this to 3 as well. Change this to 3. Sorry, 3. Okay. Maybe we're closer now. Almost. I mean, not really. Why does it say? Okay, okay. Position relative. Do I need? I'll get rid of, I'm just commenting things out. Don't worry, we're gonna get this. Background, border radius, solid, 3 pixels. We're pretty close here. Like, I mean, I know it doesn't look right, but we are getting closer. Margin -3. What's that doing? It's not really doing anything. Background clip. Okay, I think for the purposes of now, I'm going to comment all this out, except I'm just going to erase it. And we're going to try it a different way. What we're going to do for now, and we will come back to this because this is really like, you know, if I was in real life making this site, I probably wouldn't even tackle this issue until later. It's a very like extra aesthetic. I'd probably be focusing more on the structure anyway. So what we're going to do is handle it just by kind of giving it a different border color. So we can go back to the way we were doing it. And normally these have, where do we actually do the border? Hang on one sec, sorry. I just had one possible idea. No. What? Didn't do anything? Okay, yeah. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna put the gradient circle class right on the image class itself, which is the thing that has that border. And we're gonna go down here and we're gonna copy this guy. And we're going to make it have, right now we have the border of that C7, and I'm going to make it a border color of, and rather than worry about the gradient, let's just grab, you know, one of the colors in here that we like. Sure, it's good for now. Oh, what did I do? Oh, I didn't say image. I have to specifically say images that have that gradient circle class on it. There we go. And we also want the border width on these maybe to be like 3 pixels, because it's definitely wider. Okay, close. A problem that happened as soon as we made the border wider, it changed, you know, the height and everything of this. Really, we want that border to go on the inside. So to combat that, we were saying we want a padding of 5 pixels, right? So what we're actually going to do is on these ones, override it to a padding of 2 pixels. Oh, what? Okay, hang on. I think the border width 2, get rid of that for a sec, just to see. Okay, then we want the padding was 5. I think I actually just going to make it 4. There we go. I think that's proper now. So I took out, right, because it's on the top and the bottom. So we are basically counteracting the padding of normally being 5 to do 4 because we're making the border 1 pixel more, and it's being applied on both sides in both cases. And I think if we, you know, try to do a little measurement here, that looks pretty right to me. And that looks, you know, I mean, I bet on the stream, I could have just probably done it this way and pretended, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell that there's no gradient there, but there is no gradient there. We will come back to that at another time because that looks good to me. Okay, going back to our Photoshop file, we have a few more things. So let's add, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's add 5. Or not add 5, but have 5 altogether. So I'm going to copy these guys and see what happens. And we're going to see that it starts to go to a new line, which is expected. Floating things, you know, they only try and go somewhere if there's enough space. But in this case, that's not actually what we want to happen. So a few things we could do here. Let me just tidy some things up. But on our actual story list, I am going to do something called overflow X auto. If we go back now, nothing has changed, but that's essentially going to allow things to scroll. And I want to do, I think it's like overflow wrap, unset, no, inherit, initial. No, that's not how it. Okay. We're gonna come back to this, but we are gonna solve it. And all I really need to do, I believe, is give the, make this have a wider width. We'll try that first. So I'm gonna just make the width 200%. And now stuff is gonna go like that. The problem is, because we did that, the whole thing is going, the whole site, we only really want this thing to scroll. So we have this story list. I'm going to put another div inside here with something called story list scroller. And I'm gonna get rid of this guy and put him at the very end of everything we've done, including after the clear. And we'll indent this to make stuff match. And we're going to, on this, so dot story list space dot story list scroller. We want the scroller itself to have something like a width of 200%. And if we save now, and did I save this? Yeah, I did. Okay, so we're good now. And it goes and it goes. Now there's gonna be a better way to handle this because obviously we want its width to be based on its containers, but we'll deal with that another time. This is, you know, working really nice. Cool. We got our story, people. We got all that. It scrolls. It's not perfect, but it is a good start. All right, let's start working on the next piece. So essentially everything on the screen aside from the tab bar is now is one, what we can call as a component. And we'll probably call it post or something like that, because it's, you know, representing a post, everything from here to about there. So we're gonna start making that. So we have all of our sweet things. We close. Why is this? Oh, this should be indented one more. And then I think we're good. So we want to make sure we're in. So we did the header. We did the story list. We want to be very much outside of all of those, but still within the body. Make a new. I'm going to call this. I'm going to call this posts, because this is going to be a container where multiple posts are. And in fact, let's keep the same convention and call it post list. And then inside here is a class of post. And this is where we're going to put all of our HTML for this guy here. Okay, inside a post, we have a few things. I'm going to try and do this a little bit faster with the HTML. In VS Code, there's some nice tricks you can do. Like I can just type dot, like similar to if I'm doing CSS, it'll be like post top and then tab, and it will just make the div for me. And inside that, we're going to have dot post top avatar, we'll call it. And that's all good. And in fact, yeah, that's fine. And inside of this, we're going to have, we know we're going to have I'm just literally going to copy the same thing that we had before, because it's basically the same, an image. We're going to have that gradient circle thing applied to it, and an image inside of it. So that's part of post top, but also in post top, or sorry, that's post top avatar. We want post top, and I'll call it details, sure. And we're gonna have something in here called post top details avatar, or not, sorry, not avatar, username. And we might write the word username within that, and location. Your place. Okay, so that deals with the top, and we'll stop there to actually start styling it. So right now, it looks like that. We're not, you know, we're not quite there yet. Okay, so I'm going to make a new section of my CSS of this comment saying posts, and we'll start by defining the post list. And I don't know if we would have to do anything to this. For instance, is the background color is just white. So yeah, I'm just going to keep it there. We might want to do stuff with it at some point. We're probably going to have to make it scroll, but we'll just stub it in. And then inside a post list, we want to style posts. And similarly, if there was a different background color, this would be a good time to do it. And I'm going to actually do it by saying background color white. That's good. And then what's next? So not much to do there. It's kind of just a container. Post top. Similarly, not much to do with that. It's just a container. I'm still stubbing them in. It's just good practice. And in post top avatar, we are going to do something here. So a few ways we can handle this, but let's do it similar to how we have done in the past. We're going to give it, rather than giving it a width of 1%, we're going to give this a fixed width of something similar to this, 104 divided by 2. So width, what's that, 52 pixels. Okay, and then we want it to float left. Okay, we just wrote the word float. This is a good time to remember we're going to have a clear at some point. And that's going to happen within the post top, but before it closes, which is right here. Let's spread these out, make it a little more readable. Oops. Yeah, like that. So that's usually what I do when I'm writing a float. Oh, I know that's going to screw something up, so let's make sure my clear is in place so I don't get confused, because I will. Okay, so we know that the post top avatar is just going to have a width of that, but inside of it, we want to style that image. Dot image, and we've already pretty much written this code before, and we can go search out and find it. And I'm just going to copy and paste it. We'll come back at some point and do a refactor, because anytime you start to see repeating stuff, it's always good to think about how can you refactor it to not have those dependencies when you make a change. But we'll do that. And then we also want to essentially steal, where was the actual image right here. So we're gonna want this content. I'm gonna copy this whole block, paste it here, but change some things about it. Instead of story list item.image, we're gonna paste that in. So now if we come back, we should see some good things happening. Look, it's already coming together. Great, good thing we sub this in, because I realize on our posts, there's definitely some space on the top of the post, or if there's space, maybe this is just space in the post header. Let's call it that. Has a height of 14, so we'll say 7. I'm going to say padding top 7 pixels. And over here, it's probably something similar. Yeah, it looks like the same. So we can just say padding of 7, and that'll kind of spread stuff out and look much nicer. Okay. Now I'm noticing that oh yeah, that makes sense. This image, so like it's kind of, the reason I noticed it's starting to overlap with this, which doesn't make sense, but it's because we set a width. And the problem is this is definitely a smaller image than, this one. So let's figure out, first of all, what the width of the content is. And it looks like about 64, meaning 32. So we had 55 in here. We're gonna make that 32. And I actually think that's all we need to worry about. It should just get smaller. There it is, almost. It looks like there's too much padding now, because it's not proportional, because we're telling it a padding of 5. Because we shrunk it, rather than measuring it, I'm just gonna try a padding of 3 and see how it looks. Yeah, that seems about right to me. Okay, so we got that. And let's just give this I'm gonna give this whole thing a background color just for debugging purposes of red, just to see where stuff sits. That was not what I meant to do. I meant to do it on this. This is like the thing that's floating. You can see that's probably a lot wider than we need it. And in fact, it should kind of be similar to what we're doing here. Let me just make it 32. That's too small because we're not accounting for the padding. Let's just try 40. And that looks pretty good. And it's nice to just, make sure things kind of line up. So we'll get rid of the red now, knowing that it's making sense. Okay, the next thing is the post top details. So I'm taking essentially everything from here and copying this guy. And we want this also to float left. And we'll give it a width because we're gonna have to deal with this guy too. So let's give it a width of, enough to go to here. So it's basically, let's say 580 divide by 2, which is what, 290, I think. Let's make sure I'm right. What did I say, 580? 290. So floating left, we have the width. Now we've already cleared this, so we don't have to, worry about putting another one. You only need the one. And, nothing looks different, but there we go. And we'll see that the width of it is not going all the way to the edge because we've set it to a fixed width of 290. We also want to have some padding on the left of it. And in fact, instead of padding, I'm gonna use margin for no particular reason, because there is some space, between here and here. Looking like 14, so 7. So basically the same amount that we've been doing elsewise. So that just moved it over all nicely. Let's deal with some fonts. So the font size of this guy is 28, so 14. We need to copy this lovely line and paste that in. And font size 14 pixels, and there seems to be some weight on it as well. So we'll do a font weight of bold. Looking good. And similarly, I believe we can do this for not just username, but for location. It is not bold, but it's still 14, I would imagine. But maybe it's not. 24, so it's actually a little bit smaller. It's 12 when you divide it. And it's just regular. The color of it is probably the same color we've been using. Yeah, so we're good. We don't have to override the color. That's our default. Great. Now we need some padding on the whole top of our details. So I'm going to go padding top, and I'm just going to guess this one of like 8 pixels, let's say. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. And then there's a little bit spacing we need between username and your place. So we can do that just by giving this I'm going to use a margin top. Let's just try 3 pixels. That might be even too much. Probably too much. Let's just do 2. That looks pretty good. We got our guy. Now, what if we wanted this guy to be styled, you know, with the color? We should account for that too. So we've already done this gradient circle thing. I'm going to copy and paste this, and we already have the HTML on it. So we'll find where we did image, go like this, and essentially, I want to steal everything from here and paste it here so that it gets that nice border. Now, again, we have to accommodate some things here because this was now 3, so it's probably going to be more like maybe 2. Yeah, that seems pretty good to me. I don't know if it's perfect. I haven't measured the pixels, but okay, we got that. If anything, I think there's maybe too much padding on the top of, where is it? Getting a lot of CSS here. Where did we have post top, padding 7. Oh wait, no, it's the top details. Yeah, we got a padding top of 8. Let's just try 6. Maybe 7. 7 seems to be the magic number. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Look at this, it's looking great. And yeah, there's no border or anything on this because the image ends up just coming in, which we'll get to in a minute, but we need to deal with these 3 little guys. Luckily, Font Awesome will come in handy once again. So I'm going to, we're going to create one more thing that we didn't. And I'm going to, instead of putting in a container and stuff, I'm going to show you something fun. So we're going to make an I, give it a class of FA, and I think it's like FA 3 dots, but I could be totally wrong. So let's just look it up. Font Awesome, icons. And we're going to search for free and search for just dots. I'm sure we'll find something. There we go. Oh, ellipse H. Ellipsis H. So we'll paste that in there. And if we come right back to our site, we're going to see there it is. That's not where we want it, but it's there. So we could float this thing and, you know, do exactly what we've been doing with everything else. Sorry, this was in the wrong spot. Oh no, it should be, yeah, it should be in there. We could float it, but in fact, you know what? I'm going to put this in a different spot. So I want this to be part of post top, but not necessarily part of the details, because that's for this stuff and not part of the avatar. And I'm going to put it after the clear or before the clear. And when we do that, you're seeing it's actually going right there. And that's just because we gave this thing like this really big width, and it got pushed right to the edge. And, you know, we could play around with this and get it, but I want to just show you something fun. So we're going to specifically look at we're going to do post list, post top, and then specifically target the icon that we have. And we're going to go do something called position absolute. What position absolute allows you to place it somewhere absolutely based on its parent. Now its parent has to have a position of either absolute or relative in order for this to work. So we're going to go back to where we declared post top, and we're just going to add this one line, position relative, which actually won't change anything about it that we'll know, but it's important when you start using absolute things, make sure that you have a position relative on the box that you are putting the element in. Otherwise, and I'll show, maybe it'll make more sense when I show you. So let me just do this. So we're going to go position absolute. We're going to go right of, let's just try 7 pixels. That seems to be the magic number. And top of 7 pixels. When we refresh, we're going to see, okay, it's pretty good. Obviously, that's not the right positioning top. It's probably something more like, probably like 12 maybe. And to make this easier, we're going to make the background of the top of the post top blue, just so we can kind of see where this actually is. And maybe that was a bad color choice. Let's try yellow. So we want this, to be visually centered. The yellow makes it a lot easier to see. And we're just going to play with these numbers until it looks pretty good. Maybe 18. Where's my designers at? Where's my designers at? Okay, that's pretty good. And I think the only thing is it kind of feels like that icon's a little bit small. So the good thing about these icons is in Font Awesome that we're using, they're actually a font. So you can do things like font size, and we could say, I could say 20 pixels and just see how that looks. And it's gonna make it a little bit bigger. Maybe that's a little too big, 18. So because it's a font, you can do stuff like that. You can change its color. It's awesome. And the color of this looks like it's the same color we've been using without. So I'm not gonna worry about changing the color. Let's get rid of that ugly yellow. And there we go. We have this thing here. We only have a little bit of time left, but I want to at least get an image in here because that's kind of, the point of Instagram. And this part's actually going to be really easy. So we've done the post top. So I'm going to make sure that these all line up. This is the end of post top, and we're going to make a new class of post content. And inside here, we're going to put an image with the source of something. And let's find a really sweet image. Rather than using Place Kitten for this, let's cool space image. So I'm going to find an image on Google. Awesome. This one looks sweet. What I'm going to try and do is download it. So I'm going to save this image, and I'm going to go, luckily I'm in the right spot, and I'm going to put it in my images directory, and I'm just going to call it post1.jpg. As a reminder, try not to use spaces, try not to use, especially don't use spaces in file names. It can get confused servers. Also, definitely do not use uppercase, just lowercase. The reason for that is Linux servers and Windows servers and Mac and Linux servers. And they handle case sensitivity differently, and something might work on one, and then when you deploy it, it doesn't work. So just try and keep lowercase. If you want to use a space, instead use a dash or use an underscore. I prefer dash. So post1.jpg. I had a request from someone in the Q&A to send the code that I've been working on, which I'm totally obviously down to do. I just need your email address, and if anyone else wants something like that, let me know. Okay, so we've saved this, and we're going to make the source of it images / post1. And now all we really, there's a couple things we're going to have to do, but once we paste it in, we got an image. Look, it's looking like Instagram, but it's weird. It's really tall. The reason for that is images are whatever width they are, they will show up that width unless you tell them otherwise. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to copy our post list, and we're going to do .post content. And I don't think we have to do anything with that, so we'll just stub it in there for future needs. And specifically the images that are inside there, all we want to do is say width 100%. That's it. And there it is. We already have, we automatically look good. Looks good because images, if you tell it a width, it will automatically figure out the height, and vice versa. If you get a height, it will automatically figure out the width. Now, if you were to say width 100% and then also tell it a height of, like, let's just say 100 pixels, for example, it's going to start stretching because the computer is going to listen to you. If you're telling it both, it's not going to be like, but I know better. It's going to listen. So we're just going to keep it width 100, meaning, if it's a really tall image, it's going to, be tall. If it's a short image, it's going to be wide. Yeah, this looks good. Yeah, we only have a few minutes left, so I think moving on to another section would be not a good idea. So I think we're going to leave it with this. I want to make sure for people following along or people that want to follow along that they have, you know, they can kind of download this as an example and continue to play with it as a challenge. So in the, I'll leave this running for a little bit after I actually sign out. I'll keep the meeting running. That way you can chat me directly in the QA or openly, and I can find a way to get it to you. Further in the future, like, you know, when we've taught some more, there's a lot more skills outside of like coding that, you know, are part of like good things to know. You know, something that's very common where I would share code with people is over something like GitHub. But I haven't really taught you guys how to use GitHub and get the stuff from it. So just getting in, you know, something like an email address is actually like probably just as easy. And I see the friend who asked has given me their email address, so I will be sending it. I'll still leave it running for a few more minutes in case. But yeah, here's where we're at. I'm curious though, how is this looking on desktop if we turn off mobile mode? It's not going to be perfect. In fact, it might look awful. It might actually look okay though. Let's just do it for fun. You know what? Not as bad as I expected. Stuff. Actually, this looks pretty good. Other than the fact that like the scroll bar is way too big, it's pretty much as you would kind of expect. So look, we're already better than Instagram app because you open an Instagram app on the iPad and they do not handle anything. So I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll be, what day is it? Oh, today, yeah, Good Friday. And then I'm not gonna do one Monday because I know that it's kind of a holiday. It's kind of not, I know today's a holiday. Anyways, I will reach out to the same ways I have through the email list that I have from people who have joined, as well as posting to my social channels and let you guys know when the next one will be. Thanks so much. Happy Instagramming.